Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Megan Talks. I know it's been a little bit since I've done an episode. A lot of that has to do with the fact that my internet went down because I wasn't able to afford to pay. Really, there hasn't been too terribly much in my world. Let's see, I had the second job. My ex-husband takes my son so I can work my second job, but it's usually on my ex-husband's weekend anyway. Got in a huge fight with my mom, but that's pretty normal. We're very different personalities, so we don't necessarily get along. But in this episode, I decided to give a little bit more background on my life and how I ended up where I am. Because while the borderline personality disorder in itself is a genetic disorder, a lot of the way I am has to do with how my life in itself was. I'm not even sure where to start, honestly, but I guess the best place to start would be talking about my grandpa. He was not a good man. He wasn't a bad man, but he was depressed and he didn't want to live. But instead of offing himself, he took out his anger and rage on everybody else, and he literally drank himself to death. My grandma died a year before I was born. So, in my grandpa's eyes, I wasn't supposed to exist. Because of the fact that I was not supposed to exist, he hated me with a passion. Grandma wasn't gonna get to meet me, so he hated me. So I was this little abomination, and unfortunately, due to my parents' circumstances, I was forced to live with him. My parents, me, my sister, my grandpa. I have very early memories of my grandfather calling me a fat bitch. I was around 7 or 8 when that one happened. And then finally that asshole died when I was about 14. I have way too many horrible memories of that man to even begin to describe them. All of it was verbal abuse that I shouldn't have had to endure. And honestly, my parents know that that's one thing that I may never be able to forgive them for. They chose to put me in that situation. While they would have struggled, they could have taken me out. That they could have put him in a home. They could have moved somewhere else. As it stands right now, my parents are divorced. They did not get divorced until I was older, but when I was an infant, they almost got divorced. And something I've told my mom is that I wish she had divorced my dad. And that's another part of my life. Really, the verbal abuse from my grandpa, that's... While I still live with his voice running through my head, I understand why he was the way he was. I understand why he said the things that he did, because he was miserable and he wished he was dead. There were plenty of times where I wish he would have just pulled the trigger. But other than that, that's that. But back to my parents' divorce. I told my mom I wish they had gotten divorced. My parents, they didn't hate each other when I was growing up, but there was no love for each other. Their relationship in itself, their relationship with each other affected me, as well as their relationships with me. Because of my parents' non-love, my mom essentially forced my dad to be a dad, which he struggles with his own issues with depression. So sometimes it's difficult for him even to want to exist. Not necessarily wanting to kill yourself, but just wanting to get out of bed. Feeling that worth. A lot of the times I ever spent with my parents, it was separate. They were together, but separate. Dad was his own whatever, and mom was hers. Up until... Okay, let's organize that a little bit better, shall we? Okay. One parent at a time. First of all, I'll tell anybody and everybody, I'm a big daddy's girl. I'm exactly like my dad, whether I mean to be or not, I just am. We think a lot alike, and I look like my dad versus looking like my mom. It just is. I'm a big daddy's girl. Let's see. I was really close with my dad, and still am pretty close with my dad. My dad's always the one that pushes me to be better. And when my dad just says he's disappointed in me, that's... his disappointment is some of the worst disappointment. My mom, I'm used to my mom just not being happy with my decisions. But when my dad tells me he's disappointed in me, that it kills me. He was my Girl Scout leader. He took me to quite a few of my different school events. All of my Girl Scout events. Surprise, surprise, I was a Girl Scout until I was 16. Woo. He took me to my cello lessons and quite a few of my doctor's appointments. Not all of them, just quite a few of them. But that also depended on which parent was available. My dad, with the job that he had and has, had a little bit more availability to be able to take me to mine. He had paid leave that he could take, he had unpaid leave he could take, he had vacation time he could take, etc., etc. So my dad was able to do all this stuff for me, but he's also the one that understands how my brain works, because my brain functions like his. So my dad, understands, he understands the depression and how difficult it can be to just get out of bed or wash your face, brush your teeth, just wake up to the alarm. He understands that. He understands a lot of the decisions I make. My mom, she's what one would call a type A personality. She is like her father in that she probably could be diagnosed with OCD. She's not necessarily OCD, but she has a lot of severe OCD tendencies. Well, my mom isn't necessarily loveless. Getting emotion from her, getting her to act like she cares, it's a tough thing. She may notice, but she may not say anything. She may not do anything. And a lot of times it does feel like that. She just doesn't love me. I think somewhere deep down inside she does, but my mom's a very logic-based personality. So she doesn't understand when people get angry or sad or depressed. She doesn't understand depression. She's never been depressed, and she just doesn't get it. So a lot of times we would just get in fights over, really, I'd say stupid shit, because she wouldn't understand my choices, and of course my brain would flood, and instead of being able to be logical, I cry. And unfortunately, when I start crying, all hell breaks loose, because there's no such thing as logic. And I can't... And at that point, it doesn't really matter what we were fighting about to begin with. My brain will bring up old emotions or old arguments, or it'll just bring in that I'm a worthless piece of crap feeling, because there's no such thing as logic. It doesn't matter where I'm at when it happens. This past fight, I was at work, and she started telling me that I was ungrateful and that everyone does everything for me, which that in itself is really incredibly frustrating, because it's hard to say that I don't ask for help, because thanks to some therapies, I do know when to ask for help, and I do ask for help, but I don't expect people to do anything for me. It's nice when they do, but I don't expect it. And I don't really think she understands that that's how I am, and I realize that sometimes I can act like a bratty little bitch. I don't mean to, that's just how I am. I tell people, plain and simple, I'm an asshole. That's just it. I'm an asshole. I'm blunt. But with those kind of parental figures, you struggle. My sister and I both struggle with the depressions. She had her vice and I had mine. I'm not going to talk about my sister's. It's not mine to talk about. Mine ended up being sex. I didn't have very good self-esteem, so when, thanks to my grandpa, calling me this fat, ugly bitch, and that I'm not good for anything, and that I wasn't supposed to be alive, I was 15, 16, guys started paying attention to me, and I went, oh, guys like me. Unfortunately, being a teenager, you don't really realize they don't like you. They just like what you can do. Thankfully, my mother had pounded it into my head that safe sex is best. No sex is best, but if you're gonna have sex, don't be stupid. Wear a condom. Be on the pill. Both. All of the above. Contraception. It's good. It's a good thing. So, all those guys and all the attention and the this, that, the other, the modern day age that we live in, I ended up getting pregnant when I had turned 19. I had finished high school a year late, and 2 months after I finally completed my degree, I found out I was pregnant. Was not ever legally married, but I will always refer to my son's father as my ex-husband, because we might as well have been married and it was all but legal. I actually still have a lot of access to a lot of his different stuff for our son, because I would not abuse that, because that's rude, other than the obvious. But that, I thought I loved him, but I think I loved the thought of him. There's quite a bit of times where I will tell people I don't think there's a day that goes by or that went by in that relationship that he was not cheating on me. So even though it took us 2.5 years, I was finally able to end it with him, and we are so much happier being separate. He does his thing and I do mine. I finally figured out what it means to be a mom. I will fully admit that I was not the greatest mother the first year of my son's life. Not only was he a NICU baby, but once he finally came home from the NICU, I thought I was doing good, but I would have rather paid attention to my books or my friend or video games. Which, let me tell you, that's a lot different now. I keep few friends. Few. I can't handle having a lot of friends. My best friend right now, we can't really talk because she's busy doing her thing, but that's okay, because that's how the adult world works. She has her life, I have mine. But that's the basic background story of my life, guys. By the time I was 20, I had a baby, and then I divorced / broke up with his father, and now here I am. Moderately happy in a nice 2-bedroom apartment with my 4-year-old baby boy. Please remember, I love you for who you are. You are worth it. If you are struggling in any sense of the word, you feel like harming yourself, you feel like you shouldn't exist, please remember to call the suicide hotline. I will always have a link in the descriptions below. I will always have the number in the description below. Bye, guys.